Hi there. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to make a quick plug for our upcoming Peer-to-Peer Professional Forum Conference in Philadelphia, February 21st through the 23rd. If you have been enjoying this podcast, you won't want to miss out. This conference is your opportunity to be a part of conversations just like the one you're about to hear with your peers, tackling the topics that most impact your work and your organization. The conference includes interactive workshops and breakouts, inspiring keynote speakers, and networking opportunities to help you build a professional community that can sustain you year-round. For all the details, head on over to our website at peertopeerforum.com. And as a special incentive for our podcast listeners, you can use the code SOAPBOX, all one word, during registration for an extra $50 off between now and January 31st. See you in Philly. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the P2P Soap Box. I'm Marcy Maxwell, your P2P BFF and podcast host, and we have another great episode and rockstar guest in store for you today. In the world of peer-to-peer, we often say we're like one big family, right? We share all kinds of common traits. We're hardworking, goal-driven, maybe a little bit type A, or is that just me? We're outgoing, and we're deeply passionate about our causes and our desire to make a positive impact in the world. But beyond those often bubbly exteriors, we come from diverse backgrounds with unique strengths and different connections to our various missions. We know that peer-to-peer thrives on community, and the most successful programs are the ones who prioritize relationship building and meaningful connections. And that is why it is so important for peer-to-peer professionals for us to bring our authentic selves, our unique skill sets, and our personal experiences to the table. And the most effective peer-to-peer leaders, they're the ones who recognize the value of this diversity and harness the individual strengths of their teams to contribute to the larger collective, which is ultimately going to drive growth in their programs and in their missions. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from one such exceptional P2P leader, Joe Apgar, the president of Pelotonia. Unlike many of us, Joe began his professional journey in the world of finance, or as he calls it, finance. A cancer survivor himself, he initially became involved with Pelotonia as a participant and team captain for his firm's corporate team before taking on the roles of chief operating officer and now president of the organization. Pelotonia, for those not in the know, hosts a thrilling 3-day weekend of cycling, entertainment, and volunteerism. Since its inception in 2008, the Pelotonia community has raised more than $275 million for cancer research at the Ohio State University, the James Cancer Hospital, and more recently, the Pelotonia Institute for Immuno-Oncology. Pelotonia also ranked as number 12 on the 2022 Peer-to-Peer US Top 30. Now, during our conversation, Joe will generously share insights from his personal and professional journeys, illustrating really how these unique experiences prepared him for his leadership role at Pelotonia and how they continue to shape his interactions with participants and with his team. We're going to dive into strategies of how he retains and cultivates his team by really empowering them to lean into their strengths. And he's going to share all kinds of other leadership lessons. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to the president of Pelotonia, Joe Apgar. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the P2P Soap Box.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you here as well. We are coming toward the end of our first season of the P2P Soap Box and just knew that we had to have Pelotonia join us as one of the rock stars of our industry. So I know I gave people a little bit of your background, but why don't you tell us yourself? Can you just tell us a little bit about your personal journey, your professional journey that led you to your role as the president of Pelotonia.
Yeah, happy to. So I grew up in Northwest Pennsylvania in a really small sort of farm town. And when I was 7 years old, my 5-year-old sister was diagnosed with cancer. And I think really impacted and changed the way myself and our family thought about volunteering and philanthropy in a big way because um, she ended up being okay and had lots of chemotherapy and got through her diagnosis. But she had the good fortune of being a Make-A-Wish child. And so we got to go to Disney World, which at the time was the most popular wish among kids. I'm sure it's still up there.
I think it still is.
Yeah, it probably is. They've built just an amazing facilities, and the whole experience was, it was unbelievable. And for what our family was going through at the time was exactly what our family needed. So we got really linked in with the Make-A-Wish Foundation in our family's early years. And, I think nothing builds, a sense of community, like going through an experience like that. Our entire town rallied and people are making meals. And, she was, I think, a kindergartner at the time. And so our school did things where there was a day where all the kids wore hats because she had lost all her hair and was wearing a hat. So all the kids wore hats. And so just our family's been the beneficiary of great communities, really my entire life. And I ended up going to school in central Pennsylvania at Penn State University. I studied finance. I really wanted to be a banker, sort of work in the investment world and all that stuff. And I did that for the first part of my career. I had the good fortune of landing a job in Columbus, Ohio, where I still live today. And I moved out here in 2008 to work in real estate finance. And I worked at a private equity firm that still is one of the largest owners of hotels in the United States, actually. And learned a lot sort of in that business and really enjoyed my work. But just prior to moving out here during my senior year of college, I got diagnosed with cancer myself.
Oh, gosh.
And I was diagnosed with testicular cancer my very first week of my final semester of my senior year. So my last semester of college, I had to call my parents, tell them the news, and I had surgery and then another surgery and sort of had a long road to recovery with some complications. And I was really committed to graduating, from not pausing my education. I wanted to graduate with my friends, and I had this job in Columbus lined up. And so Columbus became, almost like the North Star. Like if I could make it to Columbus in June of 2008, that meant things were going well enough. I was sort of charting my course forward, and that's what happened. And my first couple of years here, my care was transferred to the James Cancer Hospital out here, which is part of the Ohio State University healthcare system. It's one of the biggest, I think it's the third biggest cancer hospital in North America right now. They're currently adding on to it. It's about to be the second largest cancer hospital in North America. It's a phenomenal research program. And around the same time I moved, Pelotonia, the idea of Pelotonia was being formed. And so they had plans for an inaugural Pelotonia ride in August of 2009. And I'll never forget seeing the signs. And I was not a cyclist at the time, but just seeing the signs all over town and thinking, what is this? And what's this bike ride all about? It benefits the cancer hospital. And it was a cancer hospital where I was a patient, and my doctor, was there, and my follow-up was there. I was not healthy enough to ride, so I was taking certain medications that sort of didn't allow me to get on a bike and ride. But 2 years later, in 2011, I borrowed a bike. I was lucky that I had a really tall colleague because I'm 6'5", and he was also 6'5". And when you get to that height, bikes become sort of an issue.
Yeah.
You can't always just get the standard bike. And my colleague Bruce, I'll never forget, and I'll always be grateful for him. He loaned me a bike. He was a big cyclist. He loaned me a bike, and I trained on the bike all summer. And I rode in Pelotonia in 2011 for the first time. And completely opened my eyes to just all the benefits and outcomes that philanthropy can have when it's done really, really well. And peer-to-peer fundraising and the value of being an active part of a community, through all the benefits, the mental benefits, the physical health benefits, all those things. And I got hooked, and I became sort of an avid rider. I became a team captain through rallying the company I was working at the time to grow our impact as a team. And in 2016, had the opportunity to join Pelotonia full time as an employee, and jumped at the chance. And it was a role that was a new role. It was a role that was, come in and just help the organization be better. I didn't have a ton of responsibilities. I didn't have any direct reports. But it was an opportunity for me to just take that one more step towards, using my skills and having an impact. And the chance to have an impact early in my career, I felt like was a unique opportunity that I just couldn't pass up.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot to unpack with your experience, but you just said the skills you had from, and I know you're a finance person when you call it finance, right? You're a finance guy. So that journey to this role is really different from a lot of other P2P program leaders. A lot of us, we started maybe right out of college or have been grassroots fundraising for a long time. And you kind of took a different route. How do you think that work experience in the finance sector actually prepared you for the role you're in now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what I've realized is there's so many different pathways into this work. And I actually, coming out of college, never even knew you could do this work. It's one of those things, I'm sure you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
People's eyes really get opened when they realize you can have a career in this type of work. I think, the type of work I was doing, which was sort of really complex financial transactions and, working with different city governments and working with, investors that are all across the world. And it's really an exercise in how do you take really complex systems and conversations and things where there's a lot of people involved and distill them down to their simplest form. I feel like the firms and people that do really well in the financial world are really great communicators. And I think the organizations and people that do really well in the nonprofit space are really great communicators. And so it's sort of that common theme of having really great communication is certainly a thread that's really existed. I think the other thing I learned was, and it's no surprise to people that have worked in finance, the expectations are really high. It's a high stress level. It's, a whole different environment. But what it really teaches you is how to have really high personal expectations and in really high regard for your work and to present yourself really well. And that translates to any, role in any industry, right? Where you want to be successful. And I also learned that sometimes nonprofits kind of get a bad rap. And, it's thought of as, it's an easier place to work, or it must just be so fun to work there. And, fun equals relaxed and not stressful. And that's not the case. It's, in a lot of ways, it's actually the opposite. We as an entire industry, sort of the peer-to-peer space and the nonprofit industry in general, we're under-resourced. You're always, scratching and clawing for the next dollar to, from a fundraising standpoint, whether that's for your program or for your operational and overhead expenses. There's a lot of complexities that go into just running the organization that actually don't exist in a lot of other organizations. And a lot of it comes back to communications and money. And I was really fortunate to have a strong background in both of those. And so I feel like that's translated really, really well. I think the other piece of it is having had cancer and been on multiple sides of that. Seeing my sister going through it myself, just lends a whole different perspective on the work too.
Yeah. Well, working in there's stress and there's big goals and there's big projects in any type of industry, but there is there is a life and death feeling in the nonprofit space, which can be good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it applies positive pressure that makes people feel really motivated to achieve a goal because they know it's this bigger purpose. Now, there's a whole toxic positivity side of it too. But at the end of the day, I totally hear you. With being a cancer survivor and a cancer patient, a member of a cancer patient family, that you also have the unique perspective of getting involved with the program first as a participant. So that's not often the case, right? So how do you think that your experience as a participant, how did that impact your approach to your job, to your staff, to the other fundraisers at the events? Like, how does that change your approach?
Yeah, I think Pelotonia had such a remarkable impact on me that first year as a participant. And, cancer can be, and whether it's cancer, whether it's any other disease or anything like that, always has such a negative, there's always a negative experience associated with it. And there's tons of positives that come out of those experiences. But, cancer itself is, it's really tough to get the diagnosis and to have some stranger, a doctor, sort of look in your face and tell you that you have cancer, and you're not sure what the future holds, and you feel really out of control. It can feel kind of hopeless. And what a lot of really great peer-to-peer organizations have done is taken that negative experience and given people an outlet for it, a physical outlet specifically. And until you've been through that experience, both going through cancer, but then also that positive physical challenge. For me, it was riding 100 miles in my first Pelotonia. You don't realize the value of that until you've been through that. And so, riding 100 miles is hard for anybody. But when you sort of layer on top that 100 miles actually means so much more than just 6 hours on a bike. It's it might be the first time since your diagnosis that you feel healthy. It might be the first time since your diagnosis that you feel in control of your own body and your own decisions. And it's very empowering. And to meet so many other people in that first year and second year that felt that same way as me, but all a little different, gave me this perspective that everybody's approaching, Pelotonia or any other organization like this from their very own unique perspective, with their own unique context and, baggage and all of this stuff. And they're using the organization as a platform for good and a platform to empower themselves and to feel, maybe whole again or feel like themselves again. And it's really emotional. And when you realize that, what you realize is, as a, now a staff member and someone leading the organization, we have a responsibility to make the experience so good for everybody in different ways. And what it does is helps us look at the whole experience sort of from beginning to end. And, the philosophy we have is, we design, if you think about our ride weekend, it's 3 full days. We design the 3 full days from beginning to end to really coordinate and be in harmony with one another. But we also realize that some people don't participate the first day. They might not come to opening ceremony, or they might just come to opening ceremony. Maybe they don't ride even, or they're volunteering. Like, their entry point into our experience looks different, but we want them to have the same outcome. And so thinking of every little nuance, every little detail is, there's nothing that isn't important in our whole experience. And I think you sort of gain that perspective from being a participant first and having felt the emotions of the event. Your brand as a nonprofit organization is how you make people feel. We visually have a really cool brand, and we've got the green arrows and all of these things. And, at first blush, people think, oh, that's the Pelotonia brand. Our brand is really how we make people feel. And we make people feel really excited, really energetic, really hopeful, and really happy. And that is what you're trying to deliver in sort of every moment. throughout the year. And I think just having the context as a cancer survivor and a participant is really helpful to that.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Brand is total sum of all of your experiences with the organization is what I've always heard.
Yeah.
So you joined in 2016, began your role as president in 2019. And we all know what happened after that, right? So as soon as you take the reins and then next thing you know, 2020 happens. And like so many other organizations, all organizations, we saw a huge drop off in in-person events due to the pandemic. But your team has been one of the ones that really bounced back pretty quickly. And you brought that fundraising back really to pre-pandemic levels or almost there. So what do you attribute this bounce back to? And how has the program grown under your leadership?
Yeah, COVID was so hard for everybody in so many different ways. I think as an organization that, like so many others, relied on in-person events, not only for the physical, just, massive ride weekend in our case, but recruiting. Most of our recruiting was done in a face-to-face manner. And of course, there's email and social media, but nothing's better for recruiting than getting face-to-face with somebody. Yeah. And maybe that's a team lunch at a company or it's just one-on-one conversation with people. And that was immediately stripped away. And we soon realized that our physical event in August would be stripped away too from a physical experience. And what we did was really thought through what the purpose of Pelotonia in people's lives was, and tried to simplify that as much as possible. And what we came up with was, we're lucky that our core activity of cycling was an outdoor activity. And so cycling actually saw quite a bit of a boom in 2020 and 2021, just from a pure exercise and fitness standpoint. But people were really using Pelotonia to challenge themselves. And they felt like challenging themselves made it easier for them to ask their family and friends for money. That's like, peer-to-peer fundraising 101. It's easier to challenge yourself and ask for money than it is to just simply ask for money. I'm doing this really hard thing, so will you do the easy thing and send me money? And we sort of tested with some community members through conversations on, could that still exist in an environment with so much uncertainty without a physical event? If we continue to push the content, we knew research continued to move forward. There was a lot of research happening, sort of cross collaboration between COVID research, vaccine research, cancer research. And a lot of our researchers were actually pivoting some of their labs to study COVID. And we tried to take advantage of that and communicate that to our community. Hey, we're not going to have a physical event, but we still want people to fundraise. Here's some of the amazing work that's going on. We are going to design a moment in time in August of 2020 where we did a live webcast, sort of a live streamed event that was the culmination of a summer of people challenging themselves. And so we stood up a new website. We created a new participant type, which was called the Challenger, where you would sign up. There was no registration fee. We removed our fundraising minimums, which, was really risky. We had fundraising minimums throughout our entire life cycle so far. And we asked people to commit themselves to a personal challenge. Could be anything, whatever they wanted. Didn't have to be physical. A lot of them ended up being physical challenges. And that our ask of them was to continue fundraising. And the Pelotonia community showed up. I mean, we raised almost $11 million. And pre-pandemic, we were consistently above 20 million. And so it was a big drop off. It was an over 50% drop off in fundraising year over year from 2019. But when we actually stood back and looked at the results, it was pretty remarkable, how much was raised. And I think showed just the strength of our community. Our community doesn't exist because we have a bike ride. We have a bike ride to celebrate the community that exists. And in COVID proved that. And then in 2021, we had the chance to bring back the physical event in a much more moderated way and with lots of safety protocols, and lots of coordination with healthcare professionals in our city. And, people were really excited to come back. We ended up raising close to $20 million in 2021. But we had sort of had our sights set on 20 million. 20 million is a number that we feel really good about. When you get into the 20s, it sort of just feels like a big milestone. And so we got really close to that in 2021. Last year, we raised close to 22 million in 2022, which was a really good feeling. And we were still doing keeping some safety protocols, from the COVID times last year. So this year felt like the first year that we were back in a really big way. And we will be back to pre-pandemic fundraising levels. We are certainly back to pre-pandemic engagement levels and just the experience we were able to deliver. I think this was our 15th year, and I think our experience on Ride Weekend this year was the best event experience we've ever had.
I love it. Yeah. So the event was just in August. So we're recording this early October. The event was just in August. And then, actually, you just came back from a test event this past weekend, right? Do you want to just give the sneak peek on that?
Yeah. So we launched a gravel cycling event, and we had it this past weekend on September 30th. It was, it couldn't have been better. It's September, end of September in Ohio. You never know what the weather's going to be. It ended up being 70 degrees and sunny during the day. It was beautiful weather. We had 200 people come out and really not sure what they were getting themselves into. I think, we have such a massive event every August. We have 7,000 riders. We have 3,000 volunteers. We probably have between 10 and 15,000 spectators throughout the weekend. And so an event of that scale, translating it to more of a niche curated experience can be tough and prove to be challenging. But we got so lucky with the weather. The 200 riders that came had, I think, probably the best Pelotonia experience they've ever had. It felt like Pelotonia because it was really well done, but nothing of it was a copycat of our Ride Weekend. And so every component felt different. Our starting and finish line shoot was in, the middle of a field through, a gravel driveway, and then sort of into the expo experience with all the food. Like, it was super cool. There was live music playing, folk music. We were in the rolling hills of Southeast Ohio, in an area called Hocking Hills. The course was the hardest course we've ever given anybody. I ended up doing the 30-mile course. It had 3,600 feet of climbing. The 50-mile course had 5,600 feet of climbing. So it was really challenging, incredibly safe ride. And, the feedback so far, we're only midway through the week. The feedback so far has been incredible. We're working on putting the date on the calendar for next year, and feel like we've developed quite a good playbook for this event. And I think in a lot of ways, we've talked about this before, like, what's the future of peer-to-peer fundraising look like? And it's hard to replicate and put on an event for 10 or 20,000 people. Yeah. Just the space needs, the costs, the labor, all of those things. And it's actually really hard to give a really high level experience to every individual. And that's what you want to do. You want to, somehow individualize the experience for people. And it's hard to do that at scale. Doing this smaller event and sort of curating to a niche population, I think, is the future of a lot of really well done events. And so we were super happy with it. I was tired on Sunday.
I was about to say, I'm amazed you're not working from your couch right now. That's 100% what I would be doing. I love hearing about the innovation, and you're trying new things. You've also been pretty upfront about the fact that, I've made some mistakes in the past. Can you talk a little bit about what maybe some of those mistakes were, and really what you learned from them?
Yeah. I think, I would say we've made more mistakes than we have, sort of big wins, and everybody gets to celebrate the big wins. But mistakes are what help a team grow and help an organization evolve. And, I think a lot of our mistakes, might not necessarily be categorized as mistakes in other industries, but we, in the nonprofit world, and especially in the peer-to-peer space, this is one of the things that really struck me as different when I came from sort of for-profit land to the nonprofit land, which is there's really little room for innovation, and there's little room for risk in the nonprofit space. Funds are limited, resources are limited. A technology company, Apple or Google, think about what their graveyard of failed projects looks like.
Right.
It's probably massive, and they've spent billions of dollars on things that nobody's ever seen because they didn't work out. If you do that as a nonprofit, you either go out of business or you end up wasting donors' money, which people never get happy about. And so there's just the appetite for risk is different, and so we've certainly had some mistakes and missteps just with how we've approached technology in the past. And I shared at the peer-to-peer conference a couple of years ago, one of the mistakes we made really early was under-resourcing technology and almost being too careful about how we were spending those resources and not wanting to overdo it. Technology is expensive, and to do technology, and whether it's a new website or installing a CRM or just bringing on that talent to your team, seems like a really big cost. And it's one of those things that's my dad always says, like, there's a reason you buy, you pay for expensive furniture because it lasts a long time, right? And over time it's cheaper to buy the expensive couch because you have it for 20 years than to buy something cheap and have to replace it. And I think that's where some of our early mistakes were, which was not investing enough up front in whether it was the talent or just throwing the resources at a really big, meaningful project. I think some of the other mistakes we've had were just being slow to communicate, outcomes even. And so we all have really high expectations of ourselves, and we want things to be perfect. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone. And it's slowing things down to get, that one more notch of perfection, rather than just letting things get out into the universe and having people react to them. And, whether you end up appearing slow or, you're not the first mover in something you could have been the first mover in. And so it's all things that have led to, us getting better as a team. And, there's been some things, just event weekend, whether it's tweaking, our starting chutes or our finish lines, or how we think about rest stops, and really little minute things that some people might see. But for us, they're really big decisions. And, there's been some things that we've had to unwind or come out and say, look, that was the wrong move for us. And so, but it's a constant learning process. And I think and this better than most people, the culture of a lot of nonprofits is to be really risk averse. And so how do you, as a leader, balance taking really calculated risks, but also over communicating that it's okay if things don't work out, and that people feel safe failing? Maybe that is sort of the best way to put it, where you have to create a culture of being where it's safe to fail. Because it can seem like you're constantly towing that line of if you fail a little too hard in the nonprofit space, do you go out of business? Do you lose a big donor? Do you, upset your big funder? Do you not fulfill a grant that, you thought you were going to fulfill? And that's one of the real challenges of the space.
Yeah. So you often talk a lot, you mentioned your team there. I know you also always talk really passionately about the importance of your strong team that you work to cultivate. So how do you, as the leader of the team, create that work environment to really retain and cultivate the great talent that are going to support this large program?
Yeah. I think, for me, constantly networking, constantly just connecting with people in terms of recruiting talent and trying to create a pipeline of talent. For the people on our team, we've always had a really great team. But it's really tricky. We're constrained on pay. And in some markets, you think back a few years ago, you're competing with companies who can throw money at employees that you can't compete with.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be tough because it feels like on one hand, it's almost an unfair playing field when it comes to compensation and some of the, fringe benefits that you're competing against. But what a lot of those other companies don't have is the mission. And, how do you create a culture around your mission, and how do you really create a culture where there's a very short line between the people on your team and the people impacted by your work? And so the longer that line gets and the further away people feel from the mission, the easier it is to become disengaged. And hard times can lead to burnout and things like that. But for us, how do we think about creating a culture where people come into our office every day and visit, and we get to talk with cancer survivors, and we have almost treat all of our team as like frontline employees to our community, where everybody's really encouraged to get to events and to be a part of the community, because the minute they feel that connection with somebody or a group of people, or they hear a story, or I have the fortune of hearing them all the time of people who might have gotten a new treatment that could totally change the course of their cancer experience for the better. Or even the opposite, somebody who lost someone too soon, but has used Pelotonia to really get back to the person they wanted to be and to really help through their grieving process. Sharing that with our team and letting our team understand how important that is can help get you from sort of the minutia of the work into, really realizing that what we're doing plays an important role in our community. I think, you've got to pay well. And so I'm sort of always in favor of, I'd rather have a person or two less and pay, try to pay more market, and compete for people, and create an environment where, we do work really hard. We put in hours, but people feel rewarded and compensated appropriately. And it's not to say money is the issue that solves things or is the ultimate motivator, but at the end of the day, people have student loans and rent, and you don't want to lose good people because you can't pay them what they're worth.
Totally.
And so it's certainly a philosophy I believe in. And then I think, the other thing I really believe in is taking a chance on people. I've been really lucky many times in my career, starting when I was at Rockbridge and working in private equity. There's been many times when, from the outside looking in, I would have been too young or too inexperienced to have gotten that promotion or to take on that project or whatever it has been. And I've had people that have advocated for me and supported me. And so we try to do that with our team, and let people surprise you with the things they can do and the things they can accomplish and the skills they can bring, or the things they can learn. And if you create an environment where people feel like they have the opportunity to take on new things or to learn new skills and stretch and challenge themselves professionally, that in a lot of ways is more rewarding than anything else. And then the long-term view, and we're constantly dealing with this as a leadership team, is how do we think about what's next for people? So actually on our annual reviews, we have a section that we've put in, which is, what do you want to do when you're gone from Pelotonia? Like, what's the next thing after Pelotonia look like for you? Because if we know that, we can, one, help you plan for that, two, help introduce you to people that might take you, a step or two in that right direction. And for us to know that, everybody has their own individual careers and individual goals. And we, as a community organization, can have these people on our team who can do great work while they're here and can go on to do even greater things in their communities or pursue their own passions. And we can be their biggest cheerleaders, and we can be the on-ramp to that. Like, we owe that to people because people are giving us their time and their trust and their treasure while they're here. And I think that's a belief I have that all employers should do. I think,
100%.
you should support people while they're on your team. But if people outgrow the role that they're in and you don't have something for them, like, you owe it to them to help them find what's next. Because I think one of the long-term marks of success for an organization is what their alumni
Oh,
look
100%.
like, right?
I had an old coworker who used to say the biggest compliment that she gets is if a former employee goes somewhere and is well trained and well versed and prepared for the job. She feels like that's the best reflection on
For
her as
sure.
a leader, that they're prepared for the next step. And that's going to make people think, well, gosh, I want to hire the next person from that organization because that last one we hired was a rock star. So I love that. And I think I feel like every time you and I talk, we could talk for forever on this element in particular. I mean, I could echo so many comments you made about, the pay, the mission, and just all of those elements and getting people, helping them figuring out what their joy is in their work. And sometimes finding out, what do you want to do in the long run? It ends up highlighting that one piece of their job that maybe they could spend more time on. Maybe they love presenting, but they don't really have an option to do that often. So it's saying, oh, okay, how do we infuse your current role with that skill that you either love or you want to develop so that you are ready for the next step?
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree.
I love it. Well, Joe, so I know Pelotonia, the 2 events just happened in August and this gravel was last week. But if there are people sitting here going, this sounds amazing, where can I learn more about Pelotonia? Where can we send them?
Yeah, pelotonia.org. You'll find all the information you need there and more. And, our social accounts on Facebook, Instagram. Give us a follow and come check us out.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a careers section if everybody's like, maybe I need to go work there. Awesome.
There is a careers section. So, would love to get some listeners in on that.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much. This was such a lessons in your leadership and your great perspectives. And so I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for letting us share a little bit about Pelotonia. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The P2P Soap Box is produced in partnership with True Story FM, engineering by Pete Wright. Music this week is by Stephen Badal. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we hope you'll consider doing just that for our show. But the best thing that you can do to support the P2P Soap Box is simply to share the show with a friend or colleague. Thank you for listening.